Now, from the Pope John Paul II Cultural Center in Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Good evening. Great to see you all. Welcome to The World Over Live. We've got a great show for you tonight. You will not want to miss it. In late June, same-sex marriage became legal in the state of New York. Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio of the Diocese of Brooklyn will talk about the role Catholic politicians played in the passage of the new law and what he's doing in protest. And later, we'll bring you an encore of my interview with the new chaplain of the House of Representatives, Father Patrick Conroy. If you'd like to be part of the show, drop us an email, worldover@EWTN.com. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. Just before the holiday weekend in San Francisco, the U.S. Department of Justice quietly filed a court brief sharply denouncing the Defense of Marriage Act. In it, the Obama administration backs a lesbian federal employee whose spouse was denied health benefits. The Justice Department argues that the Defense of Marriage Act violates the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause, and that the federal government has historically played a significant and regrettable role in fostering discrimination against gays and lesbians. The brief marks the administration's first proactive act against the Defense of Marriage law, which legally defines marriage as a union between one man and one woman. In February, the administration announced that they would stop defending the law despite a constitutional obligation to do so. The Republican-led House of Representatives has since announced that they would take steps to defend the law. And the U.S. Catholic bishops have expressed their disapproval with a civil unions bill signed into law this past weekend by Rhode Island Governor Lincoln Chafee. In response, Bishop Salvatore Cordileone, chairman of the Bishops' Committee for the Promotion and Defense of Marriage, asserted, quote, "In no way can civil union measures be considered a permissible compromise or a step in advancing the common good. Rather," he said, "they directly violate principles of justice by equating two unequal realities and accelerate the push to redefine marriage itself." Gay marriage advocates have vowed to push for gay marriage in next year's legislative session. And the government agency that monitors and sets advertising standards in Great Britain has again liberalized its regulation for abortion ads. After allowing non-profit abortion providers to run ads on British TV last year, the Broadcast Committee of Advertising Practice has given final approval to allow any abortion provider to advertise its services. When nonprofit abortion giant Marie Stopes International ran ads last year urging women to call a 24-hour abortion hotline, the group received 350,000 inquiries. Pro-life groups have vowed to petition the Prime Minister to overturn the new regulation. Another Catholic has decided to run for the 2012 Republican presidential nomination. Five-term Michigan Congressman Thaddeus McCotter announced the launch of his presidential campaign this past weekend at an Independence Day rally. On this very show last month, I asked McCotter why he was considering a run for the White House. He told me that another 4 years of this administration, quote, would not be healthy for the country, and that he believed the ultimate salvation of the American people is the grace of God and sovereign citizens. Not fit for ministry. That was the final verdict of a stinging public statement released earlier this week about suspended television preacher Father John Corapi. This follows an investigation by his religious order, the Society of Our Lady of the Most Holy Trinity, SOLT. That investigation came to an end when Corapi resigned from priestly ministry and refused to cooperate with the investigators. In a press release, SOLT accuses Corapi of a grave pattern of misconduct. According to SOLT's fact-finding team, Corapi, quote, did have sexual relations and years of cohabitation with a woman known to him when the relationship began as a prostitute. He, quote, repeatedly abused alcohol and drugs. He has recently engaged in sexting activity with one or more women in Montana. And in regards to his perpetual vow of poverty, Solt reports that Father Karapi owns, quote, over $1 million in real estate, numerous luxury vehicles, motorcycles, an ATV, a boat dock, and several motor boats. Solt commenced an investigation earlier this year after a former employee of Father Karapi's company, Santa Cruz Media, alleged misconduct. Father has since sued the employee for breaching a confidentiality agreement. Solt claims that Karapi had offered to pay the employee $100,000 in exchange for her silence. Solt also said Father Karapi has been ordered under obedience to leave his private Montana compound and return home to live with the community. In a statement issued Thursday, John Karapi denies that he had, quote, any promiscuous or even inappropriate relations with her. The her is not identified. He also decries what he calls the unjust and immoral process for addressing these allegations within the church. While Karapi denied paying hush money to anyone, he is silent on the charges of cohabitation, drug use, and sexting. This sad case continues. To help put it all in some perspective, we're joined on the phone by Dr. Ray Guarendi, host of The Doctor Is In and author of the new book, Raising Good Kids. Dr. Ray, for the viewers who followed Father Karapi, some of whom have been inspired by him, how do you, as a therapist, reconcile the man they heard in the pulpit and the man that emerges in these recent assertions by Solt, his religious order?
Some years ago, a classic study was done. It asked, how long does it take for clinicians to make a judgment? Mm-hmm. The average time that the average clinician formed a diagnosis was how long, Raymond? You want to take a guess?
I don't know. An hour? 2 hours?
4 minutes. Now, what happened after that with incoming information contrary to their judgment? Mm-hmm. They tended to dismiss it, reinterpret it, ignore it, or try to understand it in the context of what they'd already concluded. Mm-hmm. Humans do this. We make judgments on the basis of limited information. As well as he preached the Catholic truth, we didn't know him. We attributed to him all kinds of holiness, which we weren't necessarily wrong in doing, but we did it on the basis of minimal information. Mm-hmm. Fact of the matter is, Raymond, we do that with virtually 90+% of the people in our lives.
Right.
What happens, Ray? Go ahead.
Dr. Ray, what's the lesson here? What's the takeaway for people? I mean, obviously, they were reacting, I think the audience was reacting to the bold proclamation of the gospel. I mean, Father Karapi wasn't making this up. This was the deposit of faith found in the church. And I think that's what they were reacting to. And he was so bold and dramatic and determined and manly in his enunciation of those truths. What's the lesson here for people?
The lesson is this. You have to separate the message from the messenger. To the degree that he taught the Catholic faith, he spoke wisdom and holiness. That doesn't necessarily mean he himself was. And we have to remember, you don't want to be cynical, and every time you look at somebody say, yeah, but who knows what a wretch they are in their real life. No, but what you do realize is that most of the people in your life, you know on the basis of superficial information. And Raymond, it is not uncommon for somebody to come into my office and say, you know, last year my husband was voted Principal of the Year. He was voted most popular teacher in the whole district. And now I find out he's into pornography and he's got a mistress of 8 years. And to put those two together is hard for most people because we can't take into account contradictory information.
Yeah, no, it's a very trying time, I know, for many people who followed Father Karapi, and we'll continue to monitor this situation. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Dr. Ray. You're a father to me. Thank you, Dr. Ray.
You're welcome, Ray.
We'll stay in touch. Thank you. The full SOLT statement is available on my Facebook page or on my Seen and Unseen blog at EWTN.com. And Bishop Sergio Pagano, prefect of the Vatican Archives, announced this week that documents from the Second World War and the pontificate of Pope Pius XII will soon be ready for scholars' scrutiny. Soon is a relative term, Bishop Pagano told reporters. The daunting task of sorting and cataloging the thousands of documents from the pontificate of Pius XII will take another 2 to 3 years. At that point, he said, the Pope will decide whether or not to open the archives for public inspection. Later this summer, we'll bring you an investigation into the actions of Pius XII during World War II. Stay tuned for that. Meanwhile, the Associated Press is reporting the medical miracle of a woman who insists she was cured from cancer through the intercession of Pope Pius XII. The sudden recovery of Maria Esposito could provide the miracle needed for the beatification of the wartime Pope if the cure is verified as miraculous. In 2005, Esposito was suffering from a rare, aggressive form of lymphoma. Having progressed to a stage 4 cancer, Esposito had withered down to a mere 90 pounds. It was then that Pope Pius XII appeared to her husband in a dream. Her husband insisted that Pope Pius was the only person who could intercede for her. They prayed to him, and after a single 6-week cycle of chemotherapy, she was cured. The recovery stunned her doctors. Esposito told the AP, "I'm certain that inside of me there was the hand of God operating thanks to the intercession of Pope Pius XII. The Vatican will now determine if the cure is authentic and worthy of investigation. And if you need a laugh this summer, and after all this news, don't we all? Well, you could learn about my hilarious new literary collaboration with radio talk show host extraordinaire Laura Ingraham. It's launching next week, July 12th, at bookstores everywhere. Of the I Zing, America's cultural decline from muffin tops to body shots. Will also be on the book tour. Go to RaymondArroyo.com for all the details. It's fun, and beneath the laughs, an important read. Up next, Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio is here to talk about New York State's legalization of same-sex marriage and his response to the Catholic politicians who passed the law. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. Earlier this summer, passage of the Marriage Equality Act in New York made big news. The law legalizing gay marriage was aided by a good number of Catholic politicians who broke ranks with their church, most notably the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, who signed the bill into law less than an hour after it was passed. Suddenly, the controversy regarding the public duties of Catholic politicians is back in the headlines. Just moments ago, I spoke with Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio of Brooklyn about what the passage of gay marriage in New York means to the institution of marriage, as well as the responsibility of Catholic politicians. Here's the interview. Your Excellency, New York now has become the 6th state in the Union to approve gay marriage. In your statement reacting to this, and you wrote an editorial in one of the New York papers, you said that this is the nail in the coffin of marriage, and elsewhere you said it deconstructs the single most important institution in human history. How so?
Well, marriage is the most important institution in human history. And the deconstruction of it and the nail in the coffin is that marriage today is in a sorry state. We have less people getting married, more people living together, and many more divorces and separations. And when we undercut what marriage is, if we make it equivalent to just showing affection for other people, we really are undercutting what it really is about. It is about bringing new life into the world and consoling the spouses. But in a same-sex marriage, this cannot happen. There may be consolation, but there is no new life. And this is where marriage is really faltering. I hold that the state has no business in monitoring marriage except for the sake of children and for a spouse who may be abused in some way. The the state should not be involved in monitoring affection or trying to keep people together. That's not the state's province. The state has been involved in pro-family work for centuries, but I think we've lost our way. The state doesn't understand that families are the basic building block of any civilization, and if we lose the family, we will lose truly our civilization.
Bishop DiMarzio, the proponents of this gay marriage legislation, not only in New York but across the country, say this is about marriage equality. What's wrong with that?
Well, there is no equality in gay marriage because they cannot produce children. Yes, artificially we see that this is possible, but that is not the normal way that life is brought into the world. So there's no equivalency. People are saying this is a civil right. Well, I question that. Is it a civil right? Is it guaranteed by the Constitution? Perhaps that question may be answered someday. But certainly it is not equal because it is not the same as marriage that brings new life into the world.
Bishop, when this passed the legislature, the process was rather peculiar. Tell us about that, about the amount of debate, about the time given to the opposition to raise their objections to this legislation.
Well, clearly this was one of the things that was snuck in the last week of the session, in fact, the last day. The debate was not existent. There were no hearings, as normally on anything of this momentous proportion you would have hearings. This was decided in the Senate. Now, the Assembly had passed it just by 4 votes, and now the Senate took it, and there was the majority in the hands of the Republicans, and yet they lost a few votes, and some Democrats who had previously voted against it were swayed over. It really was a backdoor process, and there was constraint on many of these legislators who caved in to pressure from the governor and from others, from the party itself. So it was a sad day in New York to show that the democratic process with a small d was not working at all.
Bishop, you wrote a very clear statement following the passage of this bill, and in it you have begun a protest in your diocese. Tell us about that, and how effective do you think this will be?
Well, I've asked the parishes and schools not to invite any elected official to come to the schools or to present honors. Sometimes they would have a citation for this or that for the foreseeable future. I wanted to make a statement to say we were not happy with the process, basically. And this goes for those who voted for same-sex marriage and even those who voted against it. They're in the same boat. The process itself was shameful. And in effect, I got their attention. And I think that's what I wanted to do, is get their attention to say this is not something that we're going to overlook. It's not something we're happy with, and that the processes in the future should reflect a better democratic system in our state. So how effective it will be, time will tell, but I know already I've got their attention. There are a lot of them complaining about it already, not to me directly, but to the media. So I think I accomplished my purpose.
And basically, your protest is that those who supported this gay marriage law should not be honored, should not be invited to parish or school events in Catholic institutions, and nor should the school accept any honors from these politicians. Now, is that restricted to just those who voted for this law, or from any political body in New York?
Well, we've expanded it to all at this point so that they all get the message. Sometimes even the people who are on our side perhaps could have done more to stop the process, and they could have, but they did not, and it's unfortunate. And even those who consider themselves friends let us down, and we had to say something to them.
I want to talk for a moment about something else you wrote in your statement. You say, we failed because we sought to be sensitive to those who have same-sex attraction. Perhaps we must now speak more forcefully, more clearly. Is that a concession that perhaps you all didn't speak forcefully or clearly enough during this debate, the bishops?
I guess you probably can never do enough. And the fact is that we didn't prevail tells us we could have maybe done more. Again, it's conjecture, but I do think, unfortunately, we don't have the minds and the hearts of our own people, especially those that are not attending church. I think if you were to take a poll with the churchgoers, they do understand they're with the church. But those who are nominally Catholic, we might say, don't understand the position, don't support the church in this way. And therefore, when the polls are taken, we see that a disproportionate amount of Catholics would be saying that they're not against same-sex marriage, but these are not, really practicing Catholics. So there's a big difference. So we've got to win the minds and hearts of those that are not practicing. We've got to win them back to the church in the first place. But that's the big job that we have ahead of us. Again, we're not here to insult anybody, to demean anybody. The dignity of the human person is inviolate, no matter what path they take, no matter how wrong they may be in their actions. So that's not our intent in any way. So again, trying to do that sometimes comes across like we're giving people a pass, or that we're maybe too sensitive. But that's not the point. The point is we're talking about actions that we understand and consider to be unnatural, that we should not be supporting in any way.
Let's talk for a moment about the Catholic politicians who not only facilitated this bill, but indeed were responsible for its passage, its successful passage, and the governor himself, also a Catholic, who signed the bill. What should be the penalty for this public action? We've gotten a lot of emails over the last few days confused about the role of a Catholic politician and how does he live out his obligation both to those he serves and following the dictates and the teachings of his church.
Obviously, there's a lot of confusion with the politicians themselves. Again, why is a politician elected? Is he elected to follow the polls, to test the air, to see which way the wind is blowing? No, he's elected to use his own intelligence and to follow his own conscience, properly formed, obviously, especially for a Catholic, in voting for things that are moral, that are integral, that support the society. And there's many different things. Some issues are not have much moral content, but obviously this one does. And so it's very difficult to say, should penalties be imposed? Should they be shunned? Again, we've got to work with people in the positions they're in. We've got to try to convince them of the error of their way. We have to show them, as I try to, at least some kind of a restriction that we're not happy with what they've done, make them stop and think twice. Obviously, the only sanction that a politician really understands is not getting elected. And this is where we've got to make the voters understand the problem. That's the ultimate sanction that you can impose on a politician, because he is elected to serve the people and the will of the people. And we've got to make people understand that they are responsible also for the actions of their elected officials.
Bishop DiMarzio, in the New York Times a few weeks ago, right after the passage of this gay marriage law, Governor Cuomo spoke at length with a New York Times columnist and went on and on about the picture of Thomas More that hangs in his office, how he's a faithful Catholic, he occasionally goes to church, etc. Since that time, Ed Peters, whom I'm sure you know of, he's a Canon lawyer, he suggested that penalties should be imposed on the governor because he is engaging in public and manifest sin, and he's encouraging others to do the same. Your thoughts on this and whether he should be denied communion or other penalties should be imparted to him and others like him?
Well, that's the opinion of one Canon lawyer. I think it's much more complicated than that. Again, conscience is the ultimate judge of a person's actions, and he may be in an erroneous conscience, which I think seems to be the case. Again, you can't judge other people's conscience. Even if you're hearing a confession, no, we don't judge the conscience. We judge the content of what a person says, and then we let them judge themselves if they're penitent, if they want to start over again. But I think in this case, it's clearly he sees things in a much different way. You know, I've seen the portrait of Thomas More, who was beheaded because he wanted to serve God more than the king. And he just does not understand that part of it. And again, How do we bring people around to understanding? It's with patience. It's with, I think, speaking to them. I think we have an obligation to inform people when we think they're wrong. We have to instruct people. That's important. But as far as the penalties, I don't think there's any kind of consensus canonically about what can be done in this case. Maybe someday we will come to a better understanding of this. In the kind of society in which we're in, I think it's going to be much more difficult than in a type of a non-pluralistic society. But time will tell, and we're growing and maturing. These are questions we never faced before. They're new questions and new challenges for us.
Yeah. Bishop, in your diocese, I mean, I don't know if you do, I'm sure you have a few, politicians who are publicly and manifestly encouraging legislation and indeed advancing legislation opposed to church teaching. When you have an individual like that and they are presenting themselves, and in some cases, using their Catholicism as a political ploy, using it as part of their campaign, if you will. Hey, I'm a good Catholic and you should support me because I'm just like you. And then they run off and support these initiatives that run counter to the church. Shouldn't there be some public reprimand, some sort of calling them out, so at least they aren't using politically their Catholicism in an erroneous way, leading others to believe that this is okay, you can totally disagree, in fact defy the church, and get away with it with impunity?
Well, this is one of the reasons why I asked our parishes not to invite them, not to give them a forum, because I think on this case, clearly, they're doing exactly what you said. So we're not going to encourage them to use the church in any way to further their political ends. So I think, yes, we have to find ways of doing that. It's never so easy to do, but again, I thought that was one step in the direction I think we need to go.
No, your statement was very strong. I'm going to post it on my Facebook page so everybody can read it for themselves because it's worth reading. I want to move on and advance this a little bit. Now that you see this bill has moved forward, 6 other states have already adopted it, your thoughts on what this could mean to the religious liberties in the New York area, in New York State, and I mean both in the pulpit as well as in the Catholic classrooms?
I think, we are under siege because there's a grave misunderstanding of the issue of separation of church and state. We cannot understand enough in our society how religion is a pillar of this society. It always has been from the beginning, and it will remain, I hope, until its very demise. And we might have a demise sooner than we think in many different ways. But yes, we have to be vigilant that any religious liberty for whatever religion is exercising it is inviolate. The whole issue of the Constitution and the separation of church and state is to protect the church or protect religion and not the state. We don't have to. The state doesn't have to be afraid, but the church and religion does have to be afraid that its liberties can be diminished or curtailed, and we can see a lack of liberty to practice the faith. So I think we are in for some battles. I think we've seen already in California the imposition now of teaching the gay history in classrooms, and it goes on and on and on. So it will never end because we don't see an imposition of teaching the contribution of religion or any particular church to the advancement of society, and there's plenty of that to look at. So we have to be very careful, and I think we are up. It's an uphill battle, and we're going to have a lot of battles.
As part of this law, there was a late amendment that allowed conscience protection. Are you confident that those will protect you to freely speak from the pulpit and Catholic classrooms to continue to teach Catholic teaching on this issue of marriage?
Yes, we haven't, we're still analyzing what this really means, and it will never, it has to be the test. I mean, whatever it says is one thing, but whenever it's put to the test will really tell us then. So we're not confident that it will cover everything, but we're studying it, and hopefully there'll be some modicum of religious exemption. It's not something we were looking for. It was something that they put into the bill to make it more acceptable to some legislators, not necessarily more acceptable to the religious components, but it was more, I think, to get the bill passed.
Yeah, no, I was thinking just as I read what's happening in California, and for those who don't know, the California legislature recently passed a bill that requires, as part of the curriculum, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender figures and history will be taught in the classroom. I mean, quite frankly, I don't care whether it's gay or lesbian or anything else. Why is the state compelling curriculum for a certain carve-out group? Why not Catholic studies or Buddhist studies or evangelical studies in the classroom? I mean, isn't this a bridge too far, the government intruding on basic education and history and trying to contort it, if you will, in a particular direction?
I think so. You know, I think it's... they've made it a civil rights issue, somewhat similar to what black people in America went through, and they resent that very much. We've talked to black legislators, and they really were angry about that. It's not the same in any way. This is a particular mindset that is not a civil rights issue in any way. It's a personal choice issue, and that's the difficulty we're dealing with.
Bishop DiMarzio, are you surprised by the backlash you have endured in the past week or so when you are out there and you have been one of the most articulate and strongest voices on the national scene for immigration rights and protecting the rights of immigrants? And of course, your diocese has done yeoman's work in this area, helping these immigrants, I know, at the grassroots. There are no complaints when you're out there, you know, rallying the troops for immigration reform and immigration rights. Yet the backlash in this area has been intense. Did it surprise you?
No, it didn't surprise me. Again, even with immigration, there will be some that are happy and some that are not. But anytime you take a public stand, you have to be ready for criticism, for dissent from what you're saying. So, especially the church. I mean, the issue really is that many people don't want the church to take any public stands. They don't believe we should be involved in public policy, that we should be silent. And that's where we have to stand up for that right, that we can be involved in the public forum, and we should be, and we should say what we believe. We don't, I think as John Paul II said so well, we don't impose, we propose. And so we propose what we believe with good reasons from not a religious perspective only, but from a philosophical perspective, from natural reason. So we have every right, as everybody else in our society, to propose what we believe is to be true.
Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio, thanks for being with us. Up next, there is a new face on Capitol Hill. We'll introduce you to the new House Chaplain, Father Patrick Conroy, when the World of Our Life continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
My next guest is still a fresh face on Capitol Hill. He's a Jesuit priest of the Oregon province, and in May, he became the 60th chaplain of the U.S. House of Representatives. He's only the second Roman Catholic and the first Jesuit to hold the post. I interviewed him here on the show recently, and we didn't have time to show you the entire interview. Here is my exclusive interview with Father Patrick Conroy in its totality. Take a look.
On this day, we ask your blessing on the men and women of the People's House, who have been entrusted with the care of this great nation's people, and because of the great blessings you have bestowed on our nation, the opportunity to build a better world beyond our borders as well. Please teach each member to be generous with the gifts you have given and the opportunities with which they have been presented.
Father Pat, thanks for being here. Let's start with your job description here. Now, we saw from that clip, one of your jobs, probably the most visible one, is offering a prayer at the start of each day's session. What else will you be doing? Then what do you do?
Well, actually, that's really the only thing that's in my job description.
Oh, okay. Well, I like that job description.
You know, it's pretty good. But I mean, I think this is. I mean, I did many years of campus ministry work on university, and I had some things to do. I had programs to run, or I had places to be, or liturgies to offer. But most of what I did as time went on, is I was available to students, and the more I got to know students, the more they got to know me, the more the work expanded. And I think that's going to happen here as well. There needs to be a certain level of comfort for people to start coming, and I think that's going to happen.
Now, you were a chaplain at the University of Seattle, at Georgetown University. You were a high school chaplain when you were plucked out of your assignment and drafted into this job. How do you think, particularly being a university chaplain, prepared you for this moment?
Well, certainly at Georgetown, it prepared me a lot because, but Seattle U did as well. Yeah. But the population of students at Georgetown was international. It was all faiths, all backgrounds, and many cultures. And so my work was really with a large variety of people, and actually the retreat program that I ran at the time was intended for all freshmen, not just Catholics. And so not only was I working with young people from all religious backgrounds, they were working together. So I think I am used to being in that kind of an environment where what we have in common perhaps is how can we all be better people rather than how can we all be better sectarians, if you will. And that's really what the position of the chaplain of the house is my role is not cultic. In other words, I'm not providing the religious service for the house. My role is more like a chaplain that's available for whatever the need might be. And it may or may not have anything to do with God or with religion in the moment. Yeah. But it could.
And there are a number of Bible studies, prayer groups that are actively ongoing in the mornings, in the afternoons. I imagine you slowly will find your way into all of those, if needed.
I'll join those, but I don't need to run them, and that's just as well. I mean, the Second Vatican Council says, the people of God, the Spirit's there as well. And so I'm kind of there to witness that as well and say amen. Yeah. And if I'm asked, I'll certainly do something or respond to something. But for the most part, I'm very comfortable supporting people where they are and encourage them to go where they should be, where they want to go.
You said, whenever I do enter into a political discussion or have a political thought, personally, I get more and more upset. The indication here is that as you've gotten older, you kind of have more firmly held on to your personal political views. How will that affect you in this new position?
Well, I'm not sure that's what it means.
Okay.
In my life, I have found that there have been a number of things that when I was younger, maybe this is why I thought I'd be a politician, I loved to get in all kinds of arguments about all kinds of things. Yeah. And as time went on, I started to cull out the kinds of things that I thought were worth arguing about, and learned over time it was more important to be friends with people than it was to win an argument. And so there's been a number of areas of my life has gone along where I have much more serenity, as people in 12-step programs would say, with all kinds of people that I would disagree with on any number of things. Well, the last holdout is in matters of political discussion. And have found, actually, that an awful lot of friends have political positions very different from my own. Yeah. And I found myself having to make a judgment. Do I really want to get into this, or do I want to be this person's friend? And to be placed in a political environment, I think, this is open to any kind of interpretation, I think God's saying to me, I want to help you out here. I'm going to put you where your job is not to go there.
Father, this is the most politically polarized cauldron anywhere in the world. You have people, and in recent years, this isn't the Congress of only, I covered Capitol Hill, gosh, it's almost 20 years ago now. it was a very different body even then. And that's when Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House.
Yeah.
There was still more collegiality. You didn't have quite the hardened sides that you have today. How difficult is that for you as the chaplain to this very divided group, some of them Catholics on both sides of the aisle, claiming to embody the Catholic position when only one of them can be right in some cases?
Well, I don't know I haven't met any Catholic anywhere that possesses all of it.
Yep.
Okay, so, the Congress was very bitterly divided in the late 1700s.
Yep.
So it's not like this is the first time ever.
No.
So I think these things can be cyclical, and I bet it is.
Yeah.
So that we'll come out of this towards a little more civility. I don't know how we're going to get there, and I certainly hope I would be able to be some part of that. But I have often found out when I was a practicing attorney, I was a defense attorney, and I found what I was good at, or a way of my practicing law. If I could get my client to stop hating the policeman who had arrested him, and I could get the policeman to see my client as a pretty nice guy. He was nice to me, so I mean, he could be nice to you.
Sure.
And for people to kind of like get less antagonistic, even though they're on opposite sides, I would feel like I had done a pretty good representation, both to the criminal justice system as well as to my client. So it's that's the kind of way I've sensed myself. I mean, I'm often the person that that's the friend of people who can't get along.
Yeah.
I mean, this in some ways is a position that, I'm looking around and thinking, I've been in this kind of place before.
Would you see it as your responsibility or duty if you had a Catholic individual, a congressman or a congresswoman who didn't understand how church teaching should inform their decision on the Hill, to educate them on what the church teaches?
Oh, I would certainly do that. I understand that my position would be to do that in the internal form.
Right. Not
to do it
publicly,
not to do
or in
it
front of
publicly, but to
anybody.
do it in conversation. And of course, my understanding is that each person is bound to follow their own conscience. And in that situation, the question would be, is your conscience properly formed? And if not, where and why not? I've often found that the way people change their position isn't by being told point blank, you're really stupid on this, or you're really wrong about this. It's like, well, do you understand that the problem with this might be that it leads over here, and is that where you want to go? Or might it not be this? Did you ever think that it might be looked at this way, or a little bit differently than you've experienced it before, or even thought about it before? And I've always tried to do that with myself. Whenever I've felt, that I've had a real strong position about something, something in me is kind of like, there's something wrong with this, because you don't know everything.
The alarm bells go off.
Yeah, it's like, okay, wait a second. What are you missing? So I would think that, and I would hope I would have the relationship over time of trust and friendship, that I would be able to do that, and they would understand the reason I was doing it was because I cared about them.
Yeah.
And not because I had to be right.
In the last few weeks, the media has been filled. We've all been covering this Anthony Weiner story, a congressman who sent illicit pictures of himself out to various women. It was one of these huge scandals. He resigned. What do you think drives this sort of behavior? And it is not isolated to this one individual. We see a lot of this acting out, and particularly sending images of oneself to these people. What is it about Congress and that level of stress or power that leads to this kind of acting out, do you think?
Well, actually, you can see a lot of this kind of behavior with adolescents, too. So some of it actually has to do with, I think, a naivete about what the internet really is. I mean, I don't know what the congressman was thinking. He might have been thinking, I know this person I'm sending this to, and that's going to be it. Well, that's not the way the internet works, okay? Now, is he exercising good judgment ever? Well, that's a little too much to say. But I do think that when people experience power and they've been able to do things, pretty soon they begin to think that they're
invincible.
They're untouchable. And I've been able to get my way on many things, and maybe most of the things, at least in my circle of friends, I can get away with this too. And I think sometimes that's kind of what we do in this human condition we're in, is we tend to overdo what it is that we're good at.
Yeah. On Capitol Hill, what do you see as the greatest spiritual threat to the members that you'll be helping in these coming years?
Well, I would say that the temptation to people who are used to accomplishing a lot, used to working hard, used to doing a lot of things, multitasking, the biggest temptation is to believe or begin to believe that that's the meaning of their life, that what they're doing and what they can accomplish is what the meaning of their life is, or who they are. And what gets lost is, I think, that basic human need or insight that I need to have some time when I'm not doing, when I'm not accomplishing. Sometime when I can step aside and be with my own thoughts, be with my own God, to step out long enough to let God in. I think people get too busy and they forget to take the time that I think it's counterintuitive. Busy people need to do unbusy things. They need the rest or the relaxation or the introspection or the meditation, I think, to gather themselves to remember who they are and that, in fact, they are called to be better people and to be servants of God's people, whether or not that's their religious intention, but that's what they're called to, and that the way to do that is to be in better possession of who you are as a person, not as a doer, but as a human being. As a human being.
Why and how were you chosen for this job?
Well, you'd have to ask somebody else why. The how of it, as I understand. Now, the new Speaker of the House, John Boehner, once it was clear that he'd be the Speaker, the past chaplain, Father Dan Coughlin from Chicago, wanted to retire. Okay, so it was made known to the Speaker that he'd need to find a new chaplain. And I understand, I don't know this, I didn't ask him personally, that because he was a Xavier grad, Cincinnati, Jesuit University, that he was at least interested in having a candidate who was a Jesuit. It'd be too much to say he wanted a Jesuit, but he wanted a candidate. And my provincial heard of this desire and thought that I could possibly do the job and asked me if I'd be willing to be available, and I was. So I was on the list of, I understand, 5 candidates.
And you were interrogated, or the kind word would, I guess, be interviewed by Speaker Boehner and Leader Pelosi together.
But that was the second interview. The first interview, there were 2 staffers from each office. Okay. So they basically asked me most of the questions to get most of the information. So when I met with the Speaker and the Minority Leader, they were just like, getting their impression of the person that I think the staffers had recommended to them.
What was that like? Overwhelming?
Nah. No, that wasn't at all. I mean, my feeling about this, I didn't ambition this position.
But there was a little controversy. I mean, Speaker, I guess, Leader Pelosi, she put up an opposition to your candidacy at one point because she said $166 million had been paid by your province in settlements, and therefore it would be improper to have you there. Now, she eventually withdrew that. Were you concerned at that point?
I think I was personally a little anxious, but I also knew that it really wasn't about me. It wasn't.
No, it had nothing to do with you. You weren't involved in any of this. And in fact, I read a report where you were a whistleblower in one of these sex abuse cases.
Early on.
What was that about?
Well, there was actually it was in my home parish.
Yeah.
I was returning from the reservation where I worked at the time to do the wedding of the daughter of my cross-country coach when I was in high school. Went to public school. And her brother, who was a Notre Dame football player, had a friend who wanted to talk to me, and this friend said that the parish priest, had propositioned him. Now, as a young man, I think he was too embarrassed to say more than that. But what he said to me is he'd been propositioned, and he didn't want to go public, but he wanted to make sure that that the priest wasn't propositioning more.
Other people,
So I wrote the letter to the Archbishop to that effect. It was years later, of course, once he was an adult, this man, it was no longer anonymous because of unfortunate circumstances, but he was no longer anonymous, so the Archdiocese was able to contact him, and then he said, well, no, he had abused me. And so he was called in and dismissed.
You studied political science and thought for a time that you would have a political career. What did you have in mind, and is this what you had in mind?
This isn't a political position.
I know that, but boy, is it close to the levers of power.
Well, I think, I feel that I've been particularly blessed in my life. For whatever reason, grace of God, my parents, I've always felt that I was pleasing to God. Not in an arrogant sense, but my parents loved me, and so why didn't God? So that anything I ever wanted to do with my life would be fine, and I would want to do something to please God.
Yeah, absolutely.
So early on, my father was an attorney. I think it's natural enough for a young boy to want to be an attorney, so I did that, and but felt called to the priesthood.
To the priesthood, and you followed it.
So as time went on, there's a number of things that I've wanted to do. I wanted to be a rock and roll star. Well, when I was a chaplain and university work, I led sing-alongs, and it was fun, and I wanted to be all kinds of things.
Father, you're a rock and roll star to us. And congratulations in the new post.
God got me back on the hill.
For more information on the chaplaincy of the United States House of Representatives and Father Patrick Conroy, visit chaplain.house.gov. That's all the time we have. Until next week, you can find updates, and I offer plenty throughout the week, and the occasional commentary by following me on Twitter or on my Facebook page. Just go to RaymondArroyo.com. You can click through from there. In the meantime, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye now.